Good morning, everybody. How are we all doing? Well, I guess you can't say anything back to me, but I hope you're all doing well this morning. I'm Andrew Plato, and I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning to discuss Future SOC, Security Operations in 2020. Just a quick housekeeping, we are recording this session, so if you zone out at some point, that's okay. We'll publish the recording later. Also, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the question feature of GoToWebinar, and I'd be happy to answer all your questions at the end. So with that, why don't we go ahead and just get started and jump right in here. And again, thank you all for attending today. So I think most of you know who I am, but in case you don't, let me take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Andrew Plato. I'm the CEO of Anitian, and I'm also a industry analyst. I work for a industry analyst group called Truebit Cyber Partners. I've been doing information security a long time. I've done a lot of different things. Many of you have probably heard my story about how I quote-unquote discovered SQL injection in 1995. When I was working at Microsoft, I carried out a rudimentary SQL injection attack, went and told the developers what I had done, and they were very dismissive of me. So it's actually what got me into information security and what ultimately made me found Anitian. And I've been involved in developing security technologies and operations for many, many years. Okay, so let me tell you a second about Anitian. Again, I think most of you in the audience kind of already know who we are. But for those of you who don't, at Anitian, we're all about building great security. Security programs, security operations, security response, security leaders. So that is our mission in life. And the reason we do it, the why behind Anitian, is that at Anitian we believe that information security, or security in general, is an essential component to the growth, innovation, and prosperity of any person, business, community, civilization. I mean, if you look back in time, all great civilizations or countries or communities had security as a fundamental component. And we believe that in order for your business to grow and prosper, you need to have great security. And we do this for a wide variety of companies. I mean, you can see there's some, of course, well-known names up there. And then there's obviously some smaller firms we work with as well. So we work with a very diverse group of organizations from large to small. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about security operations. And specifically, my real intent today is to share some experience and some research that we've accumulated here at Anitian over the last few years. So we've been doing a lot of research into security operations and managed security and managed detection and response and all these sort of security operations or SOC components. And we've been doing it for many different reasons. Obviously, we've been doing it for our own benefit to serve our own managed security practice, but we've also been paid by other companies to provide analyst reports and research. So we've amassed a pretty impressive set of research. We've interviewed lots of CISOs, I mean, dozens, many dozens of CISOs. We've talked to security operations people. Of course, we've talked to vendors and technologists. So we've gotten a lot of data over the years about what does it take to do security operations the right way. And really what we've come to realize is that security operations is really not working, and it needs to change. And so my intent today is to share some of that research, some of those good insights with you to help you build a better SOC, or at least to have a better understanding of some of the things you maybe need to do to build a better SOC. And so my outline today, we're going to talk about what has not worked in the past. And I want to introduce you to a character. We call him Lou. He's the most important CISO in the world. And I think you'll enjoy meeting Lou. He's quite a character. And if you don't, you can just chuckle along at the goofy pictures. And then we're going to talk, and we're going to get serious, and then we're going to talk about what does it take really to build the future SOC? What are the pieces? What are those components? Okay? So with that in mind, I want to take a second, and I want to introduce you to Lou. Okay? Lou, as you can tell, is a big boy. He's a big boy CISO. He works at a big boy company. He has big boy glasses. He is the most important CISO in the entire world. Lou was brought in by his board of directors, the big boys on the board, and they were afraid of hackers and apparently people without ties. And so they hired Lou, And Lou stood in front of the board of directors and told them in 2010 that he was going to build the world's greatest security operations center. And Lou, many CISOs of his time, went out and built and did what he believed was all of the correct things. You see, first, Lou, like many companies, he wrote a lot of impressive policies, big, long, complicated policies with lots of rules and regulations and formality and structure, and they were written to make it really clear to everybody, all the regulations and rules, and he made sure to demonstrate his expertise with security. And of course, after he wrote all those policies, well, he needed all the security controls. So he went out and bought the best, the finest, the best of the best, best of breed technologies, the big boy appliances. He bought white appliances. He bought blue appliances. He bought white and blue appliances. All the kinds of security technologies you can think of, with dashboards and blinking and beeping and charts that went back and forth. Some of his appliances blinked twice a second. Some of them didn't blink at all. They were all part of the Magic Quadrant, Gumper, Magic Quaalude products. And after he bought all those products, of course, he had to hire the finest of the finest of the finest security operations people, right? People who, well, of course, looked just like him, right? And he brought in the best security gurus he could find. And of course, now that he had a great team, now that he had good technologies, he had to make it clear to those users and those stupid developers, no, you can't have applications. No, you can't have access to your data. Why, that's a violation of compliance regulation frameworks. And of course, while we're talking about compliance, Lou made sure he got all those stupid compliance things checked off. He found his big boy compliance audit team, and they came in and they checked him right off in about a day or two. And of course, now that Lou had a checked off framework of security controls and operations, he had to focus on hackers. He went to every HackerCon. He was an uber hacker. He had to learn every infinitesimal, tiny little way that hackers could break into his network, because he had to know them all. It wasn't good enough that, you know, he had to know every single possible way that hackers could get in. And then, of course, he set up his security operations center, a giant room filled with monitors, all with giant pew charts, the things going back and forth, and charts wiggling and flaking and going all over the place, because that's how you're going to stop the hacker scum, with lots and lots and lots of monitors. And of course, now that he had all this, Lou could go in front of his big boy board of directors and he could show them his metrics, his magical security metrics, things like how bad was going down and how all of his big boy appliances were defending the business. And of course, the board of directors was incredibly impressed with Lou. They gave him all the yes, good job, Lou. Lou was adored at RSA and DEF CON, speaking on all of his brilliant and genius ideas of building a security operations center. Well, you know what happened to Lou. The same thing that happened to a lot of CISOs. In 2016, Lou's brilliant security operations center missed the breach. His products didn't do a darn thing. None of those policies defended him. All of his hard work and everything was down the toilet. They didn't find out, like a lot of companies, until a customer told them their data had been stolen. Well, next time Lou went in front of the board, which was pretty much the next day, well, they had a very different message for him. And it was, Lou, get the heck out of here. Now, this funny little story about Lou is really to remind you that this is exactly what's happened to a lot of companies, a lot of businesses out there. The list is long and rather disturbing. There's a lot of companies who've built great security operations center. They've done everything right. They built these monitors. They bought all the right product. They hired all the smart people. They did what we think is all the right stuff, but it didn't work. It didn't stop the hack. The hack got right through. Target, Anthem. Take your pick. You can pick from the litany. I mean, this is a list. And if you're watching this scrolling thing, this is from a website that lists all these different breaches. This keeps going and going and going and going. I mean, you can see it's names we recognize, right? I saw Facebook on there at one point. I know LinkedIn had a big breach, of course. You know, Lou's intent wasn't bad. Like a lot of CISOs, he might have genuinely wanted to defend the business, but it just didn't work. And at the end of the day, it kind of doesn't matter that you do everything right if it doesn't defend the business. And that gets us really to what is the problem with security operations today? You look at the Lou's of the world, you look at what companies are doing, and there's a number of really fundamental problems. I want to start with a big one, which is this. A couple of years ago, a CEO said to me, I was pontificating about something, probably in a webinar, and I was going on and on about, I don't remember what it was exactly, but the CIO, or the CEO that I know, he reacted to me and he said, you know, Andrew, it sounds to me like you're waiting for something bad rather than looking for something good. And I sort of was like, what? You know? And he's like, think about it. You're sitting around waiting for the bad thing to happen to you rather than pushing yourself out there and going, do something. This isn't the case of business, but I started really thinking about that concept. And I did some research into it, and, you know, the psychology of it and all that, just because I'm kind of an intellectual dork. And there's really something prescient or profound about this for information security, and I think a lot of us fall into this trap. And security operations in general really, really falls into this problem, which is many of the security operations that we've built are doing nothing but sitting around waiting for that chart, that graph, that pew-pew chart to turn red. And something happens psychologically when we get into that mode. We get into this very passive mode, this mode of waiting for the bad thing to happen. And that's kind of a bad position to be in, because when you're in that position and the bad thing happens, your first reaction is not, let's do something. Your first reaction is, oh, that's nothing. I don't need to worry about that. And that's just kind of baked into our DNA as humans. That isn't some fault of your security operations. That isn't some fault of some appliance. It's just kind of the way we work as people. We're waiting. We're waiting for that attack. We're waiting for the breach. And that's exactly the wrong way to do this. We need to turn it around, and we need to take our security operations and make it go somewhere good. In other words, security operations has to go from passive to active. And that's a big shift. And part of this is born out of what I like to call the 4 a.m. fallacy. The 4 a.m. fallacy is sort of my shorthand to describe a principle in security operations, which is the notion that this belief among some security people that at 4 a.m., if you have a guy sitting in a console, or a kitten apparently, that person's going to be able to do something about the big breach happening. And that's a fallacy, because it doesn't make any sense. And it never works that way. Nobody at 4 a.m., or frankly even at 4 p.m. for that matter, is going to be armed with all the requisite knowledge and all the requisite capability to really do anything at best, at absolute best. They could maybe stop an attack that's kind of already happened, because once the alerts and the alarms go off, that's kind of a hacker's way of saying goodbye. I mean, once you're getting all these SIM alerts, once the firewalls and the next-gen firewalls have all gone off, it's kind of almost over at that point. Which leads really to sort of that next problem, which is a lot of our security operations are based around this concept that we know everything about the environment, that we know everything and can make a logical, reasonable decision about what to do at any given moment, and that's just not true. We don't. In many cases, most organizations, they don't know anything about what's going on in their organization. There's a lack of internal intelligence, let alone external intelligence. We focus all this all this effort on learning what hackers are doing and learning the techniques and tactics of the latest ransomware, but we don't even understand how our own systems run. How do you defend your own systems when you don't even know how they work? It kind of doesn't matter that you know how the next ransomware works, because you don't know how it could actually affect you if you don't have that internal intelligence. Which gets to really the next problem, which is, how do you know what to go looking for? in terms of a breach or an attack or malware or ransomware if you don't even know what it is? You don't know what the attack is, or where it could happen, or where it could actually be, where it could actually take root. The problem here really is that passive security just isn't working. And I mean, I could show statistics here, and I could show you all the hacks and how they've been going up, and breaches have been going up and up every year. But you guys all know that. You know those statistics. I don't need to show them to you. It's just not working. Now, this is the classic model of a SOC. This is if you watch presentations on security operations from all the vendors out there. I watched one on Splunk, for example, and I've seen, you know, other vendors do them, and even competitors to Anitian. And we all have a very similar sort of view of what a SOC is. You have people, you have product, you have processes, or you could say technology instead of product, right? People, your SOC operators, processes, you know, the procedures of your SOC, and of course the tech that you use, the next-gen firewalls and the SIMs and et cetera. And the SOC is kind of the union between all those, right, when the people and all that kind of come together. Well, I believe this is a flawed model, and I believe this model needs to change. This model is part of the problem, and it's conceptually maybe okay at some levels, but it just doesn't work as we move forward. And part of that is because it's not putting things in the right places. You see, when you think about these three components of a SOC, okay, each of them has strengths and weaknesses. If you think about the people component, in this case we've got Guilfoyle here, right? Okay, people, their strength in security operations, as a general rule, I'm not talking about a specific person here. I'm not necessarily talking about Guilfoyle, right? I'm talking in the general sense of people. People are creative, we're innovative, right? We're intuitive. A human being can have intuition about something, which is, you know, is a very valid thing. People can use their intelligence and kind of sift through data quickly. That's creativity or ingenuity. But people are inconsistent. They're unreliable. And again, I don't mean unreliable in the sense that they're bad employees, although some of them might be. It's just we're human, right? We're prone to error. We're slow. Like it or not, in comparison to many of the computing systems out there, humans are way too slow. And let's face it, some of us are drunk, at least sometimes, okay? If you think about product then, products have your technology, right? Technology has certain benefits, right? It's consistent for the most part, always pretty much does the same thing. It's reliable and it's fast, okay, right? But of course it's uncreative. It isn't going to invent a new way to defend you. And even with some of the artificial intelligence capabilities that we have right now, reality is that most technology is still not that creative. It isn't going to spawn a brand new way to defend you. It's of course merciless, and I mean merciless in the sense that it's just very binary. It either is or it isn't. It's going to block or it's not. A piece of technology doesn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I decided I don't want to do my job. Okay, and that's good and bad, frankly. And of course, technology may someday rise up and kill us all, especially if we unleash artificial intelligence. And then we think about processes. The processes that we build into an organization, right? Well, these create trust. The great thing about process and procedure and such is that they're trust builders. They're trust builders with other people in the organization, with customers, and they demonstrate a capability, and they're comforting. When people have a lot of processes, it makes them feel comfortable. They feel like things are under control. It demonstrates diligence. So processes are, of course, important. But unfortunately, they're often very inflexible. It's difficult to get them changed when you need them. And they can be used against you. They can create blind spots. If a hacker or a malware or something kind of knows or is particularly targeted around a particular procedure, well, then that procedure would become blind to detecting that or stopping that. So procedures always have that risk of creating a blind spot in your organization that you can't necessarily see inside of. The SOC of the future then needs to play the strengths of each one of these if we're going to move forward. And what that means is that the people in our SOCs, we need to focus on their agility and their ingenuity. We need to put people in the right place, which is not having to process data, and it's not having to necessarily write a bunch of procedures per se, but it's to give them the opportunity to be agile, which is something humans are good at, well, some humans, and ingenuity, which is something that humans are also good at, and something that actually will fuel many of the SOC operators out there. Structure and formality needs to be in the technology. That's where the speed is. That's where things, that's a rack full of products or a cloud full of products. They don't care that they're very strictly formal and structured. In fact, that's good for them. That's where the structure needs to be. That's where the formality needs to be. And when we think about process, we need to create processes that are flexible and diverse, things that can move and change quickly, processes that give us that layer of comfort and trust and demonstrating capability, but don't tie us and bind us in. So this is really the challenge of our future SOC. How on earth do we do that in order to build this future SOC? And well, that's what the next section is all about, is how we're going to take those concepts and take that idea and change the SOC of the future so that the SOC of 2020 is quite a bit different. Let's start with redefining that Venn diagram. I believe, and here at Anitian, we believe that the SOC of 2020 is focused and structured a lot different. It's built in a very different way. First off, it begins with people. Now, that isn't fundamentally different from the view of SOCs for the last 20 years, but they're really the beginning and to some extent the end. You have to build and cultivate great people. And then you need to fuel those people with great intelligence. Now, intelligence is a catch-all word for many different things here. Intelligence is internal intelligence, it's external intelligence, it's threat intelligence. It's the amalgam of good information that your people have at their disposal to do something with it, to understand what's going on. This is exactly how our intelligence community kind of works. If you look at how spies and, military intelligence and all these other things work the same way. They have all this intelligence and they use it. They use it to stop the bad guys or foil terrorist plots or whatever, But then the last piece of this is automation. We've got to take all these great technologies and we got to get the technology doing the work for us. And so that's the future, is to automate everything possible. All right, all that sounds really good, right? It's like, yeah, I'm sold. I sure am. How do you do all that? Well, I wouldn't be a good consultant if I didn't say I've got a 10-point plan on how to do that. And let me walk you through my 10-point plan on how to do that. And step number one is you got to start with those people. You got to start hiring for 2020, right? Remember Lou, he hired a bunch of people who look just like him, okay? Isn't going to work. Stop trying to hire for tech skill. Splunk, Logarithm, Palo Alto, these can be learned, okay? Anybody can learn how to run a Palo Alto firewall. It's not impossible, okay? Anybody can learn how to run a Splunk console. Not that difficult. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not trying to trivialize it, although it might sound like I am. I'm not. What I'm saying is with focus and determination, people can learn that. What you cannot teach people is things like creativity, curiosity. You can't teach ethics. You can't teach people to be social. These are things you can't teach, and these are the people you need. These are the people you want in your SOC. And they're a lot different than what you might think, okay? They're not always technical people. They may be good IT people. And so I think one of the key benefits to one of the key qualities that any good SOC operator has is that they do have hands-on tech skills. And when I say that, I mean somebody who's built computers, who's lived and grown up with computer systems, who's run an Active Directory, who gets and likes technology, who likes to play with it and work with it, and it's part of their life. And has that, we like to call it wrench-turning capability. But good SOC people are also very social. They like to communicate. They like to talk. They like to share. They are inherently sharers. They are not all of these other things. And specifically, they're not enforcement-minded. I think one of the big mistakes we make in a lot of SOCs is we hire people and we sort of tell them that they're the enforcers, that they're the strong arm of the IT team, and that's really not it. We don't want enforcers. We want thinkers. We want creative people. We also don't want audit or compliance people in the SOC. That's really not a place for audit or compliance-minded people. This is a place for people who really like a good challenge. But I would note, and I think it's worthy of an aside here, that the SOC analyst of the future looks a lot like these guys and girls. They're millennials. And I say this simply because these are the people who are taking over our workplace. Now, I'm, of course, a Gen Xer. I know some of you in the audience are as well, and such, but the reality is that the generation that's going to run our SOCs is the millennial generation, or even the generation behind that. And they have a different working style, and they have a different approach to things. And quite frankly, they want this kind of challenge. For many millennials, for many people in this community, this is an ideal position for them. They like it. They like the challenge. They like to do it. But it does require realizing that you need to build a different kind of culture. Okay, apart from that side, the next step is you are going to need technology. I know I like to always, downplay technology and VARs, and everybody sort of gets on me. And maybe that's something I just like to do for fun, for my own sort of issues. But in reality, you do need technology to run a SOC. This list on the left, you need everything there. You need every one of those. You're not going to be able to really do security operations unless you've got pretty much everything there. Maybe we could say file integrity you could get along out with, or behavior analytics, but really you're going to need something in every one of those items. On the right side are a few that may be optional. Deceptions, I think, are a very cool technology. It's something that we started working into our managed security offering. And the benefit of a deception, if you're not familiar with them, is deception technology is kind of like a honeypot. You put it in the environment and you make it it kind of looks really hackable. And if anybody or anything tries to hack that system, it's kind of like a early warning notification. One way you can do simple deceptions is put user accounts into your environment that no user actually owns. And they're purposefully like weak user accounts, or they're left open or something like that. And the idea is if anybody tries to use them or hack them, then that tells you it's very likely malicious activity. So that's a classic deception. And so deceptions are a good example of something that are valuable. A little tough to work with at this point, but they're valuable. DLP is another one, and there's probably others. But you're going to need to buy some tech. Now, first thought, a lot of you might say, I don't have the budget for this tech. There's no way I can afford all this tech. Here's the thing. A lot of this can be had for free or very inexpensive. There's managed security providers, of course, Anitian is one, that can provide this. There's a lot of ways to get this tech where you don't have to spend zillions and zillions of dollars. Okay? Some of it, I would say, is probably best for a commercial product, things like firewalls. But everything else, you can get open source versions, and they do quite well. That doesn't mean they're easy to use, but they do quite well. Your next step, you need to get into the cloud. One way or another, the SOC of the future is not sitting on a big bank of virtualized servers in your environment, okay? It's got to be in the cloud, because that's where everything is going right now, right? 90-some%, last statistic I said, this statistic on my slide here is a little old, but last statistic I read showed that 98% of companies have some or all of their environment in the cloud. But only about 17% of workloads are in the cloud. So there's a huge migration of the cloud. That 17% number is probably already moved up since I wrote this slide. Here's the thing about the cloud. It's more secure. It just is, for a variety of reasons. It can scale way faster. I mean, the flexibility of the cloud is just, it just is. But here's the big thing. You can put your team anywhere. When you've got your SOC in the cloud, when you've got a virtualized SOC, it doesn't matter where your people live. They can live in Portland, Oregon. They can live in Portland, Maine. They can live in Hong Kong. That gives you the flexibility to hire people anywhere, to find the right people anywhere. And that's why virtual SOCs which is exactly what we do here at Anitian, and other managed security providers do the same thing, are becoming very popular. They're also infinitely flexible. You can size and scale them. You can move them. One of the big benefits of putting your SOC in AWS, if you decide to open a European operations, you can put your entire security operations and data components in a Eurozone virtual cloud, and you won't have any of the geolocation privacy issues. Of course, Europe and other countries have much stricter privacy regulations than the United States, and it allows you to separate your U.S. operations and your European operations into separate clouds, so that you can avoid the privacy of the General Privacy Protection Act issues. So there's many, many benefits to putting in the cloud. I'm not going to do a cloud, I'm not going to do AWS's job here or Azure's job to sell you on the cloud, other than to say this is where you want to go. And you can always connect on-premise using VPNs. AWS is, of course, a number one by a long shot. We obviously at Anitian have a little bit of a bias to AWS because they're a client of ours, and we're very familiar with their platform. Our platform is built on AWS. We believe it's more flexible, it has more capability, but that much being said, there's nothing wrong with Azure or Google or some of the others, ServiceNow. They have their differing sort of capabilities, and you can support them as well. The long and short of it is, it doesn't really matter what cloud you go to, just go to a cloud. One thing I would note about AWS that I think makes them a standout is that they have an extremely robust compliance program. We know this because we've helped them with it. And that can help you. So when you move your SOC into the cloud, you can pick up and inherit some of their compliance, some of the compliance baselines that they have. Your next steps are all about intelligence. So now that you've got people and now that you've started to migrate and you've got the tech, now you have to start finding the right people for your team. Or I'm sorry, now you have to start amassing intelligence for your organization. And this begins with internal intelligence. The reason breaches happen ultimately is because of people, because you just don't know what's going on in your own environment. That isn't necessarily a failing of people, it's just inherent in a lot of institutions. It's difficult to gather intelligence inside many large companies. So you have to ask yourself some of these important questions, things like how well patched are you? How many open vulns do you have? Who's watching the logs on your SIM? You need to know these things. You need to understand your own environment. You have to know what's going on internally first. This is what always sort of galls us in the security space, is that people will spend an unbelievable amount of energy and effort focusing on what hackers in Ukraine and Russia and China are doing, but then you're like, well, tell me about how you patch your systems. And they're like, oh, I don't know, I have no idea. But in China, they've got blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, you're going to tell me you know more about Chinese hackers than you know about your own systems? That's a problem. That's a huge problem. In fact, it's the number one problem in a lot of places. You've got to understand what's going on right inside. Number one, you've got to have an annual risk assessment. And I mean an enterprise-wide, full-on technical risk assessment. You can't do it yourself. You can outsource it to places like Anitian. But you got to have, as part of that risk assessment, you need to have a comprehensive inventory of every last little infinitesimal thing in your environment. Every app, every server, every cloud, everything, every user. And you're going to need change management. You're going to need to know, once you have these inventory and risk assessment and such, and you've got some of this intelligence, you got to be able to manage that change. So consistent and flexible is the key there. How do you do that? That's a whole other presentation. Change management is a science in and of itself. But you have to have some process and practice around that. This is going to give you this internal intelligence. Once you start understanding your environment, now you can start understanding the outside environment. So you got to start amassing some external or threat intelligence. Now, your vendors are the first line for this. Most of your next-gen and SIM vendors, next-gen firewall and SIM vendors, are going to provide a lot of great intelligence. If you've got a Palo Alto or a Fortinet or a Checkpoint or whatever, they have threat intel and malware and all that. It's baked right into their product. And so that's first line to get that. Many SIMs nowadays come with threat intelligence feeds baked right into them, Splunk or what have you. Here's the funny thing. Most of those vendors, do you want to know where they get their threat intel? Yeah, it's from all these free sources. Now, some of them, of course, amass it out of their own data, right? Symantec, for example, they've got 8 billion installed endpoints, and they can, roll up a lot of data out of that. And that's of course, there's some value to that. But a lot of the greatest sources are just free. And here's a list. These are some of the ones we use in Anitian. This is, of course, not a comprehensive list. They're literally the page of free threat intel feeds goes on and on and on and on and on. Twitter, social media, Facebook, many of them publish threat intel feeds. They publish sticks and taxi information that you can put right into your SIM. And it's about malware and known bad actors out there. DNS, there's a lot of DNS services out there that publish outstanding, some of the best threat intel out there. Umbrella from Cisco, OpenDNS. Many other open DNS or DNS providers can provide absolutely phenomenal threat intel, and in many cases it's absolutely free. You don't have to pay a dime for it. And you need this. In addition to the internal threat intelligence, your risk assessment, which told you about the threats you face as a business, now you need to understand the threats that are, of course, going on in the world, because those two create two sides of a coin. You're now having a full picture of what's going on in the world, and now you've got to start to look for that bad behavior. You've got to start to use that intelligence. Put that intelligence to work, and that is hunt. Now, this is a list of hunts, some classic, what we call fundamental hunts at Anitian. We use this as part of our managed detection response. This is, of course, not a complete list. The list of hunts we do is a mile long. But this is what you've got to be doing. This is what a good SOC, this is what the SOC of 2020 is doing, hunting. It's looking for something, in this case, bad, rather than something good, but that's good. Do you know what I mean? Bad, good, anyways. You're going looking. You're looking for evidence of compromise. You're hunting for things like movement of sensitive files, use of credentials that shouldn't be used, right? Bad actor list matches, right? You got lists of botnets. Is there any botnet traffic on your network? That should be a relatively easy hunt to do. In fact, your firewall should almost do it for you, or certainly your SIM. One of the classic hunts we do as part of our managed detection response, it is the hunt that has been responsible for discovering more malware at our clients, is the infamous workstation at night check-in hunt. So hunt's very simple. We essentially look through the list of workstations and say, did any workstation in the environment check into an unusual source in the middle of the night, like 4 in the morning, when it should be very quiet, doing almost nothing? 9 times out of 10, when we see something going on there, it leads to a malware infection or a ransomware infection, and something we can stop before it gets out of control. Very recently, one of our Sherlock guys, one of our managed detection response guys, carried out this hunt, because we carry it out all the time. We actually have it fully automated in many cases. Detected something, looked on the system, determined that, of course, the ransomware had turned off the antivirus, because it always does, or it disables it, or there's so many tricks you can do to the endpoint antivirus. Ran Malwarebytes, which is a great product, I might add, on the box, discovered all the malware, ripped it off, cleaned the system, they wiped it, they were back up and running in minutes. Okay, this one hunt stopped, who knows what kind of breach or ransomware would have happened to this company. And that's what your security operations has got to be capable of doing. Looking, finding, hunting, investigating, and stopping in an active way, not a reactive or passive way. We discovered this not because an alert went off, not because an alarm, not because any chart on a wall monitor went red, but because our guy, or in this case an automated hunt, went out looking for a specific pattern of behavior. And you've got to start doing that as well. Here's the good thing. A lot of SIMs are good at doing this now, as long as you program them correctly. And there are technologies that are helping you do this. So big push over the last few years is in automation technologies, and this kind of gets us to our next phase of what we have to be able to do. We have to start automating all of this. You've got to make your entire security operations be as automated as possible. And I know there's always somebody who says, oh, wait a minute, what happens if something bad gets blocked? I'm sorry, that ship is long since sailed. Okay, auto blocking, auto reaction, automation is the only way you are going to be able to stop certain attacks. It is foolish. I'm sorry, it is flat out foolish to think human beings are going to be able to react at the speed of any attack going on these days. So you have to automate. How do you do that? First off, you got to stop buying point solutions, okay? You want to look for integrated technologies. Big kudos to Fortinet. They have rolled out this whole security fabric concept where they integrate with all their products as well as third-party products. Cisco's doing something very similarly. That's cool. That's the kind of stuff you're going to see more and more of. You want to migrate or move or look toward any technology where it's highly integrated with other pieces, SIM, next-gen firewall, endpoint, etc. Because that is going to inherently give you a capability of automation. Beyond that, you got to start fusing sort of your detection, your response, all of that together. And there's a lot of automation platforms that can do that for you. Some of them are Phantom, for example, is won the RSA Innovation Sandbox a couple of years ago. Hexadite, Swimlane, FireEye has one. Exaby. There's numerous technologies in the space. Now, if you're not able to do all of that, there's still a lot of ways you can automate without having to go out and buy an automation platform. And that really becomes the point of what is it that we automate? What is it that we have to do? Well, first, you got to auto block everywhere. Core perimeter everywhere you can. Those hunts that I mentioned a couple of slides ago, you got to figure out a way to automate them in your SIM. Many of them are just straight up searches. So when we automate them in our clients, we build out these searches, we build out dashboards for them, and that's what you do. Have it so that it's a dashboard. So it's like, okay, the workstation check-in hunt. It's one dashboard. Click, there it is. I can see. I see a workstation that checked in. Now I know something I got to investigate. Automating the response to anything strange in the environment. Something weird happens, your security operators need to essentially invoke a process that is highly automated to grab information from the environment. Get logs, image endpoint systems, gather hash data from systems. That's forensics data collection at the endpoint. So ideally, in the perfect world of the SOC of 2020, an analyst can see something, be concerned about it, press a button, and then there's tools. There's tools that can do this. There's the Taniums and other endpoint products out there that can go out and conduct a complete forensic sweep of that box, give you an image of the box, give you a list of all the hashes of all the files on the box, and give you basically everything you want to know about that box, and can give it to you in minutes. And it's fully automated. That analyst doesn't have to walk anywhere, do anybody, doesn't have to annoy the user. He can push a button. All these things can be brought to him, and now he can sift through it. The analyst can sift through that data and say, okay, let me see what's going on here. Those hashes, for example, a list of all the hashes on a box is incredibly valuable. In fact, it's one of those texts I'd strongly recommend you all have, right? Be able to search and eradicate any file based on a hash. So a list of hashes, you throw that up into any one of those threat intel sites, and it can tell you in seconds whether any one of those hashes is a known malware or known ransomware, known dropper file, known problematic, known something. And so within seconds, you could have, okay, there's something going on in this host, or there's not. This is that active component I was talking about. This is the point where your people are now in an analyst role. They're in an active role. They're hunting. They're looking. They're going out. They're not waiting for the alert. Your analysts need to spend time analyzing the output of all these automated programs, not sifting through log data. That's what the automation is for. That's what your SIM is for. That's why you bought a SIM. And a lot of people say, well, my SIM is really tough to use. It's complicated. Oh, my God, it's hard. I get it. I buy it. SIMs are a pain. And if you don't feel like you have the internal expertise to do that, that's why there's outsourced. That's why there's managed security. Right? That's why, frankly, we do what we do. So there's a lot of resources out there. The next two are all about getting you focused on the right things, getting you focused on what needs to go there. You got to ditch the whole pew-pew charts. Frankly, the SOC of the future has no monitors on a wall, or maybe one monitor. I'm sorry, but monitors on a wall don't stop hackers, okay? I get it. They're cool to look at. And, the whole war games thing, it's cool, pew, 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 watching the little I get it. It's fun. But I'm sorry, that does nothing to stop attackers. It isn't going to protect you. You got to shift into more of a burn down list, okay? In development, right, you have this idea of you have a list of things you got to do, burn down list, okay? Call it a threat list. So this is this picture I'm showing you here is a snap from our Sherlock portal we're developing. And it's all based around this theory that we're not going to have charts and graphs and pew-pew charts. It's all about this is what you got to do right now. Here's the issue. Here's what you've got to work on. Work this, work this, work this, work this. A burn down list of things. So you're constantly, actively burning down the next threat. Okay, we've got a threat. We've discovered something. There's an issue. There's a problem. There's something going on here. Okay, investigate it. Get the data. See if it's something. If it's nothing, you're done. Close it out. Move on to the next list. Focusing on the threats and the issues you need to deal with right now, rather than charts and graphs that may look cool and might make your board feel like they're important, but it doesn't actually protect you. These lists, these burn down charts, these active kind of oriented taskings, this will protect you. Because eventually you're going to get to a task where you're going to discover something, you're going to eradicate it, and that stops the breach. That stops the dwell time. That kicks the ransomware out. And that keeps you off the front page of whatever paper of choice you might be on. Okay? The chart on the monitor in the dark room is not going to protect you. These kinds of things will. Lastly, our last sort of recommendation for the SOC of 2020, and this is more in reaction to where the world is sort of going, which is you need to get to a disposable IT infrastructure. The future of computing for all of us is basically this. It's having workstations and systems and servers and environments that at a moment's notice we can recreate from gold images. We can automate that recreation. We can shift the data over, we repoint everything, and we destroy the original. Now, there's a lot of companies that are already doing this, and the cloud actually allows you to do this. This is what's great about Amazon and CloudFormation scripts and Sparkle and all these sort of automation capabilities is that you can completely automate this. And we've been working with a number of customers who do this, and it's really super fun. In fact, this is actually how our managed security platform works. It's a fully automated, we build it out. We can build it out in minutes. So the principle is powerful because you can essentially recreate your entire environment at a moment's notice. You have ransomware inside the environment, or you think you have ransomware, let's rebuild the entire network tomorrow. Click, blah, 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 and it's all done in an automated fashion. And when you have everything in the cloud, that's relatively, and I emphasize relatively, it's not the simplest thing to do, but it is doable. The benefits from security are enormous. Many of the ransomware and malware and all the attack problems that we have essentially disappear because you can just wipe them out. And that's the best response of them all. I know everyone's like, well, we need to get law enforcement involved. We need to contact Air Force Cyber Command. No, you don't. Okay? First off, they don't care for the most part, probably. And secondly, that's not the proper way to look at this. The proper way to look at this is we're in business to do whatever we're doing, healthcare, financial services. We need to be able to do that business. And if ransomware gets into our environment, we need to eradicate it quickly. And we need to get people back to working quickly. And any of you who've done IT for any length of time, you know we've all been burned by, right? You tried to you tried to fix the computer, you tried to fix everything and put everything back together, and it never works. And after about 9 hours of twiddling with the hard drive and everything, you finally realize, screw it, I might as well just rebuild the system from ground up. Okay, that's a painful lesson that every one of us has learned. I've learned it. Trust me, I learned it so many times. Okay, same principle works right here. No, you're not going to fix it. You're going to blow it away and you're going to start over because it's the simplest thing to do. Because they're computers. We don't care. All right? This is where formality and structure need to be put into place. Disposable IT has one of the best implications of it, or one of the best things that it can do for you is it forces formality into how you build things. The mere nature of having to do it. Now, this is disposable IT is a whole sort of separate presentation in and of itself. What I can tell you, though, is the SOC of the future is going to be like this. And it's going to be SOC operators with the ability to go, I see a problem on this system. You know, the hash has showed something. I push a button, the box rebuilds itself. We're done. That's it. You know, I tell the operator, go to lunch. I'll have a new box for you when you get back. And then it's gone, and you don't need to think about it. Okay. So that's our way to build the SOC of 2020. Got a couple of final thoughts. And if any of you have any questions, this is a good time to ask them. I'd be happy to answer them here in just a moment. But a couple of final thoughts. We're all going to have to start to get used to a new normal in our industry. First off, people have become numb and indifferent to breaches. I mean, my daughter actually told me yesterday, she said, hey, Daddy, I heard on the news that there's this new malware and breach, and isn't that what you do? And I'm like, yeah, another day, another breach. I was sort of like, so what? And I know that would sound a little flippant, and it might sound a little surprising coming from us who actually do that for life living, but the reality is it kind of has become that way for everybody. It's another breach, it's another day, right? I mean, there was a big breach, huge one, right? That big, the breach from the election group that like all the records from all the voters, right? And it was huge. It was like every voter or every person they'd ever targeted, right? And it was like millions, and it barely even cracked the front page of most news sources, right? That gets to the next thing. Privacy is pretty much just a fantasy. We don't really have privacy. And I know you might think, well, that's wrong. We should. Well, that's a different debate. Okay, I live in the real world of information security, which is there is no such thing as privacy. It's long since gone and dead, particularly when you're talking in a corporate environment. And quite frankly, a lot of people pretty much are to the point, particularly younger generations, they expect their data to be stolen. They expect it. In fact, they give it away, right? Data, therefore, is rapidly declining in value. Credit card data is the clearest example of this. 10 years ago, you'd go onto the dark web, you could buy big blocks of credit card data, and it cost, thousands of dollars. Now, you go onto the dark web to buy credit card data, they'll practically give it to you for free. Credit card data is of very low value now. It isn't zero. You still need to protect it. I don't want you to think you can't be PCI compliant. Healthcare data, personal data is rapidly declining in value, which means the efforts and the necessary to protect it is also therefore declining. Orchestration and automation allow us to do rapid detection, response, and repair, because it's no longer necessarily always about the theft of the data, although that's bad. It's about keeping our operations going. It's about keeping our businesses doing what they need to do, staying on top of things, preventing those breaches, but allowing people to continue to work. Technology is necessary, but it's not necessarily what's going to make the difference. Palo Alto, Fortinet, Checkpoint, I don't care what you buy. They're all basically the same. The differences between security technologies is largely irrelevant nowadays. And that doesn't mean you can't have favorites or you can't like certain things, but it isn't going to make a difference. I don't care what firewall you have. It has nothing to do with the firewall you have. It has everything to do with how you use it. And lastly, and here's something that might surprise a lot of you when I say it, hacking has not really changed that much. You could say, well, what about ransomware? What about all these things? It's still the same basic thing. They get in, they try to steal stuff. That tactic largely has not changed in 20-some years. People want to get into your environment, they want to steal data or cause problems, they want to do something bad because they want to make money, because they want to rip you off. The tactics are all basically the same. Maybe the vulnerabilities have changed, maybe some of the exploits have gotten a little more sophisticated, but at the end of the day, the tactic is largely the same. It's not strength that's going to protect you, it's agility. It's not compliance that's going to assure, it's discipline, the discipline of your people, your processes, your team. It's not what you know, it's what you don't know that's really important. And it's not skill that makes somebody qualified, it's their behavior. It's how they talk, it's how they act, it's how they react. Having skill is important, but it's behavior that defines a person. The SOC of the future therefore, is not about technology per se. It's what I said earlier before. It's about people, it's about intelligence, and it's about automation. And it's about that slide from a long time ago, the one with Guilfoyle in it, that said it's putting everything and it's playing to everyone's strengths. It's making technology do what it does best, it's making process do what it does best, and it's making people do what they do best. When you put everybody in the right place and you play to their strengths, now you've got a SOC that can really go places. I would be remiss to say, of course, I have to throw in a slide for the sales pitch, so there's the sales pitch. My marketing person would get mad at me if I didn't. There's the sales pitch. It's about our managed security services, of course. But with that in mind, I will say, does anybody have any questions at this point? I do want to say thank you very much today for listening to me and spending the time with us and going through all of this. I hope this presentation has been helpful and has given you some insights into it. I hope it has helped you think of some ways to build your own SOC. Of course, if you have any thoughts or need help with that, here at Anitian, we'd love to help you with that, and we'd love to be of assistance to that. But the SOC of 2020 is going to be a lot different than the SOC of 2010. So somebody asked, can we get a copy of the slides? Of course. We will, of course, always publish our slides. We'll publish a recording of this presentation. That should be published later today. And we'll put it on our YouTube channel, and we'll send it out to all of you who attended the presentation. You'll get a copy of all of that. So, is there any upcoming, so we got another question. Are there any upcoming compliance standards that echo the principles in this presentation? I would say a lot of that's an interesting question. That's a good question, by the way. I would say what's happening is a lot of the compliance initiatives are starting to shift to this model. PCI has already started kind of going that direction. This understanding that the data is getting devalued. And so now it becomes more about sort of assurance, and it becomes more about, are you simply aware of what's going on in the environment? I would say that you've also seen a lot of maturation of things like SOC, right? Security controls, like the SOC 2 and SOC 1 from, as part of the SSA 16. You look at what the old version of SOC was, the SAS 70, and you look at what SOC 2 is today with their whole unified control framework that they use. There's another similar sort of move toward an expectation that you have all of these controls in place and that you have people monitoring them. So I would say that I don't think there's any sort of compliance necessarily that's coming up. What is happening is the compliance is starting to move toward that direction, and that will continue. Also, I would also mention the GDPR, the European Privacy Standard. Again, not a prescriptive standard in any sense of the word. It doesn't tell you what products you need to buy. There is no such thing as a GDPR certified environment. What it is a sequence of privacy requirements and expectations, but it is going to require protection of data at a significantly higher level than we do here in the United States, which I would note I think is a little weird, because as the value of data, as data devalues, you've got certain parts of the world who are actually pushing harder to protect that data, which I think is you're looking at a situation which eventually those two are going to kind of run into each other, and they already have to some extent. So let's see. Next question: How much adoption are you getting in disposable IT? How large, mature are the organizations executing that principle? I would say the adoption has started speeding up lately. So we first saw our first sort of disposable IT infrastructure probably about 4 years ago, and 5 years ago. And it is actually, that's what got us really into it, because we saw, as with many, it's one of the benefits of being a consulting firm, you get to see a lot of different things, right? And so we got really fascinated with it. But they were really the only company. But as we've kind of gone along, we're seeing more and more of it, and it is starting to work its way down into smaller and more mid-sized companies. If you look at some of the big places, the Netflixes of the world, the Ubers of the world, most of these places are exceedingly highly automated. They use disposable IT and have for a long time. Netflix, for example, they can spin up thousands of instances and capability within a moment's notice, and then destroy it all at a moment's notice. So the disposable IT is, what I would say is, if you are a small shop, if you're a smaller organization, the investment in disposable IT and moving everything to the cloud and automating all that, it may seem insurmountable at first. It may seem like an incredible amount of work, but the long-term benefits to your business are absolutely enormous. You could literally build an entire environment that you alone can run. So I know for some of you working in smaller places, you're thinking, how do I keep myself relevant here? How do I serve the business? This is actually going to help you serve the business better. So I would encourage you, I would strongly encourage you to invest in cloud automation skills. AWS offers a lot of training classes in this. Learning cloud formation scripting, it's an exceedingly valuable skill to have, even if you don't stay where you are. I'll tell you, we'll hire you because we want that kind of skill set. So, okay, next question here. We don't have a SIM. Are there any other options? I'm not sure our company is big enough to purchase a SIM. Everybody needs a SIM. I hate to say it. You need one. There's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of, first off, of course, I would be remiss to say all managed security providers, including Anitian, offer a wide variety of SIM solutions. We do. We have a cloud-based SIM. We can spool it up in minutes. It's based on Elastic. It's a great platform. There's open source, free SIMs, low-cost SIMs. Here's the thing. Bad SIMs can sometimes almost be worse than expending a lot on a good SIM. Because you buy a bad SIM, you invest a lot of energy and effort into it, it kind of gives you nothing. It's really difficult to get data out of it, which at this point, why the heck do you even really have it? You'd be better off to hold back and buy a nice SIM or get a managed SIM. Now, here's the other thing I would tell everybody. I don't care what SIM you buy at the end of the day. If you want to buy some cheap SIM, fine. It's not the SIM that's really going to ultimately make the big difference, though. The big difference is what you do with it. It's the programming, it's the reporting, it's those dashboards, it's those searches. That's the big key. And that's something you can outsource. And again, I would be remiss to not say that it's something you can outsource to Anitian or other managed security providers. Of course, we're better than them. You got to have a SIM of some format, of some size, of some capability, because you got to have that data in one place. You got to be able to look at it. And without that data in one place, you're never going to find it. That's that internal intelligence problem. If you don't have all that log data and firewall data going somewhere, you're never going to really know. Okay, we're at the end of our time, but there was one last question I want to answer this, which is how much adoption, or no, I answered that question, sorry. I answered the adoption one. Last question I want to answer is, how do you dismantle an old security operations and transition to a new one? You don't need to dismantle it. What you need to do is convert to the new one over time. It's a conversion process. It starts with your people. It starts with training your people, getting them active, taking them out of a passive, sit in front of a monitor mode, and get them into a mode where they're hunting and looking. Once you've got that, you're on your way. After that, it becomes all about making sure you've got the tech, making sure you have good processes and practices in place, and then starting that process of automating every possible way you can. And the good thing is once you get people who are more in an active role, they'll be willing and wanting to do all that because it'll make their jobs easier. So, all right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and close up here. I want to say again, thank you, everybody, for attending. I went a little over, and I apologize on that. Thank you for listening to me today. If you have any further questions, concerns, or issues, please feel free to email myself or anybody at Anitian here. Again, recording of this will go live later this afternoon. Slides will, of course, be made available on our SlideShare. You are always welcome to check in with us, and we'd be happy to talk to you about our managed security capabilities, including our SOC of 2020. And with that, I will close up and say have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the week, and happy 4th of July.